Hi, welcome. Join me with my coffee and transplanting session. Here we have a Maypop plant. Now, if you bought something from us, you would see that there would be three, four, five sometimes rooted cuttings. Some will be stronger, some will be less strong. That's just how nature works. That's why we put in more to even out the odds. Now, when do you know that you should transplant? One, each of them will have a leaf, should have leaf, a small young leaf. You could tell by the fact that okay, I'm gonna try not to wiggle. It's coming out from the crotch of the main leaf, of this main leaf. Now the main leaf, sometimes there'll be full leaves like this, as you can see, like a dinosaur feet. Sometimes it will be clipped like this, and this is to help rooting, because we don't want all the moisture to evaporate out of the bottom of the leaf before it starts rooting, which basically means that we're trying to limit how much water gets out of the system and how fast. So regardless, it might be clipped, it might be full, but if you see a couple of leaves coming out from the crotch of the main leaf, here we have a small one, if you can see. Here's one, and here's another one. Here we go. Yeah. So that is a good indicator that it could be ready to endure the shock of transplanting. Now, if it is not ready, you should wait. But until then, you keep it at its little bag and wait for it. If you are transplanting into ground, I would highly recommend do that in early spring after your frost date, your last frost date, wherever you are from, and just look it up, last frost date, your location. If you're trying to transplant it into a container, which is what we're going to demonstrate today, prepare your plants for this. Some people tend to want to water it before transplanting. I would tend to like to dry it out for 2-3 days to let the soil condense and not be crumbly. I would even sometimes give it a squeeze so that the excess water gets out a couple days earlier, before transplant day. Then it'll be slightly easier to handle. It doesn't crumble in your hand. Now for the destination, this is a food container that we are upcycling. I want to normalize how the type of containers that we could use, because if you look at this type of plastic is actually a lot stronger than some of the little seedling pot, the black ones, square looking ones. Those plastic tend to be a little flimsy. Sometimes when you pick it up, a little bit of weight, it tears. That it doesn't make sense. Why don't we use something that is already going to be part of the waste stream and slow the waste stream down? Anyway, I digress. Now, fill this container with soil. I like to keep this, we're going to call this destination, the soil, quite wet. It almost looks like muck. We tend to not like the idea of muck, but plants do. If you look at the edge of ponds, there's full of muck, full of nutrient, full of moisture. Now, we don't want to soak it in it. We don't want like standing water, but having really moist soil to begin with is nice. For them it is. Now, so what I would do, how far do you fill it up? What I would like to do is, see how it's a little transparent? I like to visually mark it out. So the edge of this top of the plant should be roughly an inch or so below the top edge of your container, wherever it is, so that we have some room for mulch. Now, why do you need mulch for a container? That's a good question. One is that we're mimicking nature, meaning outdoors. When you're outdoors, you would have fallen leaves, you would have branches, wood chip, whatnot, to cover the soil. And that's what we want to do. We want to mimic nature. Second, water your plants in a container. A lot of times that first pour, there's a strong force from the water. And that mulch will help you ease that force and also divert the water and spread it out faster, but going down slower, if that makes sense. In other words, you're preventing erosion. Another rule of nature. Thirdly, it evaporates slower, so then you don't have to water as much. It regulates itself to for the most part. You water it once, you might not have to water it until 2 weeks later, or even a month sometimes. So because the wood chips or the branches, the woody material soaks up water and keeps it in the cell, in the system. When the plant needs it, when the soil feels dry, it'll naturally soak it up. Okay, enough about water and mulch. This is wet, this is dry, this is wet, this is dry. Now on the side, I have, just for this demonstration, I have a bucket of water, again, using my trusty containers, and a bucket of more muck, more soil in very moist soil, essentially. Okay, it's very, very easy. You would find that all the preparation is done to make this part of the process easy. Now, a lot of people like to, loosen up the plant with its roots and all that, and then put it in new soil. Not that you can't do that. If there's something wrong with your soil, I would highly recommend you, change out the soil if you need to. But understand this: soil and roots have a relationship. That's how roots communicate with the beings in the soil to obtain nutrient. In other words, the soil is the root's neighbor. Imagine if you pull your children out of nursery or the school that they're used to, and then put them into another school where there's no friends, there's no one that they're familiar with, that they could find protection with, or what they could hang out with, then they would be unhappy. They would be lonely. It'll be a long time. It'll take a little while. Not that they're not going to make new friends, but it'll take a while to adjust. And that is the same. Well, it's a good enough analogy for us humans to understand that this that you're transplanting is not one plant or several plants, but it is a whole community that you're putting into a larger community for future growth. So now is, without further ado, I'm going to use, and you could see why, put this aside, you could see why we squished it earlier, and we're using a bag instead of a container. A container is nice too, but I tend to like to keep shipping light. So now we're taking it off as if we're taking off socks. Now hopefully your root system didn't grow through the mesh. If it did, just gently wiggle it out. Hopefully you could get it all out in one piece. If not, and a little bit breaks off, that's okay too. Now because it already had a few days drying out, it actually comes out like a ball, almost like a rice ball. Hopefully this is clear. There we go. So you could hold everything in one hand, one palm, and then there we go. Gently, don't plop it in, gently, and then I would just place it on top. There we go. It's a tad bit taller. There we go. It's maybe half an inch taller than the top edge. That's okay. When you start watering, it'll sort of even down and drop down a bit. There we go. Just sort of aim it at the center. Now comes your muck, your other container of muck. I'm going to pull this onto the side and then pour it down on the edges and fill up the container. We'll be right back. And here we are. It's a close up. Filled with soil, rather moist. I'm going to leave it like this without watering for probably the next month. This plant will stay in this container over the winter, and then next spring, early spring, I will plant it in the ground. As you can see that there's quite a bit of wood chips up here. As you can see, aren't they cute? Okay, now they can grow up here. Thanks for watching.